Okay, we're still missing one person, but we'll go ahead and get started, and hopefully they'll be able to join us shortly. So first of all, I just want to welcome everyone to the meeting this evening. I want to thank you for taking time out of your evening to join us. For those of you who may not know me, I'm Gary Bradford. Been a Plumas Lake resident since 2005, and I'm the county supervisor that represents the Plumas Lake and Wheatland areas. Multiple residents have expressed concerns about the evacuation process for East Side residents should an emergency occur, because there's really just the Feather River Boulevard exit as well as the bike path. And so I scheduled this town hall to provide an opportunity for you to hear from some of the local agencies that know the most about these types of disasters that are most likely to occur in the East Side neighborhood, and what the evacuation process would look like in those various disasters. And also to give you an opportunity to have your questions and concerns answered. So I want to introduce and thank the following individuals for their participation this evening. So first of all, Sheriff Wendell Anderson is here. And we also have Kyle Heggstrom, who is the Linda Fire Chief, Kevin Mallon, the Yuba County Administrator. Oscar Marin should be joining us shortly. He is the OES manager for Yuba County. Mike Lee is the Yuba County Community Development Director. Kevin Perkins is the Assistant Yuba County Community Development Director. Sam Button is the Yuba County Public Works Director. And Patrick Marr is the RD 784 General Manager. So thank you, gentlemen, for your participation tonight. I really appreciate it, and I know the residents do as well. So just a few quick housekeeping items. Based on the poll I conducted in the East Side Facebook group, residents overwhelmingly preferred this town hall to be held virtually, which is why we're using this format versus meeting in person, just in case anyone is curious. I am live streaming the meeting to my supervisor Facebook page, and I am recording it, and we'll share it later via YouTube for those who are unable to make it tonight. The town hall will be divided into two sections. First, we'll hear from a few people that I previously introduced, including Community Development, OES, Linda Fire, and the Sheriff's Department. And hopefully that will address some of your questions and concerns. However, for the questions and concerns that aren't addressed during those presentations, there'll be time for additional questions. And so we'll spend some time answering those. I've muted all participants except those who will be speaking. During the Q&A portion of the town hall, you'll use the raise hand feature in Zoom to indicate you have a question. I'll unmute you, and at that time you can ask your question. While it's certainly not required, you're welcome to have your video on at any time, especially if you are asking a question. And I will not be able to monitor Facebook Live for questions. So if you are participating just watching that, probably won't be able to see your questions and have an answer provided. We may or may not be able to take questions out of the Zoom chat. But certainly, if time allows, we will try to get to some of those as well. So if you want to put them in there, you can. So we're going to go ahead and start off with Kevin Perkins and from Community Development, and he's going to go ahead and kind of give a little bit of an introduction to the development in that part of Plumas Lake and development in Plumas Lake in general. So thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Gary. Again, I'm Kevin Perkins. I'm the Assistant Community Development Director with Yuba County. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to be here. I'm going to be, relatively quick. I don't want to bore anyone with some of the history, but, of course, I'll be here the entire time to talk through any questions anyone might have at the end of the presentations regarding development. So back when I was a freshman in high school in 1993, the Plumas Lake specific plan was adopted by the Board of Supervisors, specifically September 21st, 1993. As part of that approval process for the specific plan, the specific plan is a really big area that has a specified zoning and covers detail and specificity for a certain area that doesn't include everywhere else in the county. And so it's a really big land use process, approval process, which takes a number of public meetings between the Planning Commission and our Board of Supervisors, and that involves public comment, and the plan gets sent around to a lot of different public agencies and expert subject matter people that will review different aspects of the plan, from land use to circulation, transportation, and then ultimately that plan is required to have an some sort of environmental document. In this case, it was an environmental impact report, which is the highest level of environmental approval process in the state of California. So all of that was created in 1993 as part of that approval of Plumas Lake specific plan. Part of the plan designated about 300 acres east of Highway 70, which is the area that we're talking about tonight. That area was, as part of the Plumas Lake specific plan, was designated for single family residential and also a couple of commercial spots. And, any of you guys living out there have seen the gas station that's getting built right now, and we hope to have a commercial little retail area that should come online here shortly. After the plan was approved, the overall land use designation was for residential, and a number of developers, there were 4 different subdivision maps. So what a subdivision map is, it takes a larger chunk of property and then it breaks it down into smaller lots. And so, again, there's 300 acres and there were 4 maps that got approved on the east side of Highway 70. Those 4 maps totaled had a total of 932 residential lots, and then again the 2 commercial lots and the park and ride and park that you guys see today. The first map the county received an application for was in 1995, and that's River Oaks East. River Oaks East is approximately 290 lots and was approved by the the Planning Commission, in September of 2002. Again, that process, the approval process, involved us routing traffic, different environmental concerns to various agencies, people of the public, and there were public meetings to be able to voice any concerns or to talk about issues with the projects, or this project in particular. At the time, or currently, there is a requirement in Plumas Lake specific plan that their secondary access is required, and the bike path that is currently on the east side of the current residential subdivisions was determined as the north-south secondary access to go from, in case of emergency, to be able to go from the subdivisions all the way north to Plumas Arboga Road. So as part of the approval of River Oaks East, that bike path was one of the requirements. Next, there was River Oaks South, and Lennar built out River Oaks East for any of those that want to know. And River Oaks South was next approved in 2003. That subdivision made up 259 lots and had a vested approval and didn't really start to be built out until about 3 or 4 years ago. The next approval that we had out of the 4 maps was the North Point subdivision, which makes up 215 lots. That was approved by our Board of Supervisors in July of 2007. And North Point subdivision is the subdivision at the very north of these 4 subdivisions, and is currently where you guys see the dirt being moved because the developer is putting in the infrastructure for the new homes. And lastly, River Oaks North was approved for 168 lots by the Planning Commission in 2007. That one was developed by Lennar, and I think they're close to being built out. It's between River Oaks East and the North Point subdivision. One thing that I do want to note about the subdivision process is that when the developer receives approval for these subdivisions, they are given what's called a vested right. They have the right to develop these with the conditions of approval that were imposed on them at the time of their approval. So at any point in time, as long as the map is still alive, because each map has an expiration date, the developer at any point in time can meet the conditions of approval, build the infrastructure, and the county is mandated to approve those maps and to allow the final maps to go in. So that's my quick little spiel on the history of the 4 subdivisions on the east side. Again, it's roughly 300 acres and 932 lots. I'll be here to answer any questions at the end for questions and answers. Thank you guys so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Kevin, for that history of how the area got developed and approved. And next, we're going to move over to Oscar from Yuba County OES, who's going to talk a little bit about what OES does, hazard mitigation planning, and maybe some discussion about primary risks to the Plumas Lake area, specifically the east side. Are you able to unmute yourself, Oscar? You should be able to. Let me see. Looks like Oscar, looks like you may not be connected to audio. I'm not sure what's going on with that. Kevin Mallon, is this something you may be able to jump in on?
Yeah, maybe I'll pinch hit for Oscar here. He just texted me. He said he can hear everyone. He just can't speak. Oh, actually, he just sent me another text and said now he can go. So
okay. I don't see a little microphone next to his name on the participant list, so it's like Zoom's having trouble connecting to his audio for some reason.
Gotcha. Maybe while he's working through that, Gary, do we want to go out of order and go on to the next speaker, and then we'll plug him back in?
Sure, we can do that. Chief Heggstrom from Linda Fire, can you go ahead and chat a little bit about maybe the fire risks that exist to the east side?
Yeah, Supervisor Bradford, I think I'll be more than happy to speak on our behalf.
Thank you.
All right, well, good afternoon or good evening, everyone. Supervisor Bradford, thank you very much for hosting this meeting and having us here to answer these questions and to discuss these concerns. Again, my name is Kyle Heggstrom. I'm the fire chief for the Linda Fire Protection District, which does serve the Plumas Lake area with our Station 3 that is in the middle of the Plumas Lake subdivision off River Oaks. On behalf of the east side, I mean, I know there's a lot of concern from citizens, specifically in wildfire, as we've seen from Maui and the Camp Fire and other very significant fires that are really concerning. And I know there's a lot of concern about the evacuation routes and getting out of that community in the event there is a fire. I can tell you on behalf of the fire department, we have multiple plans in place, and we quickly go into unified command with the sheriff's department to assist with evacuations and making sure that people do evacuate the proper methods or the proper routes that are down in that community. I do feel that with the 4 lanes that come out of that community onto the highway and the Feather River Boulevard overpass, there is a significant amount of area to evacuate quickly. And going down the east side on the bike path was definitely a valid route. I know these events happen fast. I can tell you that our processes are fast as well. And we definitely have those in place. And I'll let the sheriff's department talk about zone haven and other items that are out there that can assist with notification of the community in the event there's a fire. But again, I do think I can understand people's concerns, but I can ensure you that we have plans in place to meet those needs. But Supervisor Bradford, is there anything else you would like me to elaborate on?
I think that's probably good for now, although I do anticipate there might be some questions and more specifics that folks want to dive into, but we'll let them ask those when we get to that point. So next up, we're going to go over to Sheriff Anderson, who's going to talk a little bit about the evacuation process and what would happen should there be an emergency in that area.
Thank you, Supervisor Bradford. Can you hear me okay? Well, hi, folks. My name is Wendell Anderson, the Yuba County Sheriff, and obviously, you've heard from Chief Heggstrom. We share your concerns, and actually, last year when the bear was up, I went and checked the bike path because I too was a little skeptical about it being used as a form of egress during evacuation, and I was able to travel through it, and it's not optimal, but it will work. And it's what we have, and we have to make plans with what we have. And between the exit onto Highway 70 and the bike path, we do have a plan during high water, especially this past year. We had daily meetings with the Yuba Water Agency, daily meetings with OES. Zone Haven is something that we've really worked hard to develop over the past couple of years, and it's been very successful. If you're not signed up on Zone Haven, I would encourage you to do that. It allows us to give you early warnings, which is going to be imperative if we have an emergency out there. Is early warning notification through Zone Haven and also through Code Red. So sign up for both of them. We do have plans in place. There are so many potential situations. It's hard to prepare for them all, but I think that my staff does a great job of preparing for emergencies should they come about. Obviously, we'd all like to see another road built, but I just don't know that that's feasible at this time. And I think some others will talk about that later on in this meeting. But we're doing all that we can to prepare for any emergency evacuation from I saw somebody mention a train derailment. That is something we've talked about. But working within the parameters with the hands that we're dealt, I think we have a good plan in place. But again, early warning through Zone Haven and Code Red is going to be the key. So I would urge you to sign up for those if you haven't already. Supervisor Bradford, is there anything that I missed? I know that I personally went and drove that bike trail during this last high water season to ensure that our keys functioned, and we did it early, and they did. And I believe without a doubt it's a viable option, and it's the best option that we have if the other is blocked, obviously. So I don't know what else I can say. I'd be happy to answer any questions that others may have, but unfortunately, the road structure that we have is what we have. So we need to prepare with what we have, and I think that we've done the best to our ability.
Thank you, Sheriff. I am looking to see if Oscar's been able to join a different way. I don't see him. So Kevin Mellon, is there anything you want to say from an OES perspective, or should we move into questions?
So Gary, he connected a different way, so he should be on your list there. You just need to make him a co-host.
Do we know what he's connected as, like what it says?
It was a cell phone. I'm looking down your list here. Yeah, I see him down as Oscar Marin as a cell phone.
Yeah, well, that I can't make, for some reason I can't make that individual a co-host. I wonder if they're called in as opposed to connected via the Zoom app on a phone. Yep. I can ask to unmute, but he's not unmuting when I say that. So.
All right. Well, maybe I'll just take a shot at making sure everybody's aware that.
Oh, yes, there we go. Now we can hear you. Great. Excellent, Oscar.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that, everyone. The technical piece here, the VPN was kicking me out of the Zoom meeting every time I logged in. Okay, so going forward here, to let everybody know that Yuba County OES, we have, for the county of Yuba, we have multiple hazardous plans already in place for the community of Plumas Lake, for instance, located in the Zone 3 for the floods. And we always have plans in place for any type of disaster that could be affected for that county, for the county residents. We rest assured that we practice multiple scenarios with the public safety agencies throughout the county. We're in constant communications with Cal OES and the state warning centers, DWR with the Department of Water Resources. For the Plumas Lake area that we have listed here in our hazard mitigation plan, we worry about, I know the community worries about the floods, the levee failures, wildland fires, extreme weather. We are, rest assured that we are constantly working on and always trying to perfect the better method to better perfect the plans that we have in place. But we are always constantly watching the forecasting and working with our partner agencies on the river system there, and the zone haven that we have in place. And like the Sheriff Anderson mentioned, one of the best tools that could be utilized by the community is the zone haven, the code red notification to be signed up. There's a plans in place for the way we evacuate, and using the zone haven maps allows us to evacuate efficiently. Moving forward, the Plumas Lake area for the Bear River, I mean, we have multiple trigger points throughout the Yuba County. Yuba County is pretty much, in retrospect of the flood season coming up, we have 6 zones separating the Yuba County, and all have the certain trigger points that we all look at. And we will keep the community informed of any decisions made in retrospect. Is there anything, Supervisor Bradford, do you want me to go directly and ask? I can't see the questions that pop up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and at this point, I guess, unless someone, any other speaker from kind of the panel has something that they want to add, we'll start the Q&A portion. And then if we could just have the most knowledgeable and appropriate panel member kind of respond to each question, that would be great. So, and I know in some cases that might mean, more than one person. It may be part of an answer from one individual and part of an answer from someone else. So if you'd like to ask a question, I would request that you please use the raise hand feature on Zoom. And if I see anyone stick their hand up, then we can go ahead and I can unmute you and you can ask your question.
Gary, or Supervisor Bradford, this is Kevin Mellon. I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware in the chat. I put the web link to the county website where people can go to sign up for Zone Haven and Code Red.
Okay, great. So I unless I'm missing it, I don't see anyone raising hands. I have to imagine that there's a lot of questions. There we go. Okay, so looks like Jennifer has a question, so we'll have her unmute.
Good evening.
Good evening, Jennifer.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate. I have significant concerns with the planning decisions made to ignore CAL FIRE safety requirements. Within the chat, there is a post which notes that using 1993 and the planning process and the IPER for the CEQA planning document, as well as for the safety documents, is significantly concerning given the numerous updates that have happened in state law and in CAL FIRE with respect to safety standards. I know that CAL FIRE does allow for some flexibility for local fire marshal or local fire personnel to make a determination that safety is acceptable. However, CAL FIRE regs also say that you are not to have more than 20 acres on a single access point with respect to ingress egress on dead end roads. This community originally, when it had 50 units in it, had a no outlet sign placed at the beginning of the community. Clearly, there's no outlet in the back because you cannot regularly use the bike trail as an access point or you receive a ticket and it's a safety violation. Furthermore, previously, we've also called to find out where the keys are. I'm happy to find out that Linda Fire has located the keys. At one point, I had taken it upon myself to call both the local office, the main office in Linda, as well as the schools to locate the keys, and they were unlocatable for a while. I've got a couple of questions, obviously. How do you reconcile the requirement in CAL FIRE, or I should say the recommendation in CAL FIRE, that you should not have one ingress point for more than 20 acres of land, regardless of the number of units, given I would assume with 930 units planned plus ADUs, you're looking at somewhere around 1,500 units in the beginning, which is like 3,000 cars if you only factor still two cars per home, and you have only one main access point to get to Feather River. You've got the bike trail, which it remains to be seen how quickly the bike trail will be opened in case of an emergency. During the flood evacuation, it took anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half just to get on the freeway from the east side with 50 homes. I can't imagine that we'll even be able to make it in 45 minutes to an hour and a half with the number of homes we currently have and the number of homes that will be added. But I'm significantly concerned about the lack of safety, given we also have a train, and that train moves freight, and a lot of that freight happens to generally be caustic materials. There was unfortunately a situation where somebody was injured on the train, but there's other possibilities for derailment. Lots of things can cause a train derailment, and propane has a 5-gallon maximum where you don't have to disclose what's on the train. Chlorine is a 1 gallon if you have them individually packaged, which means when those trains derail, we may not know what's on them, which will cause a caustic problem. And I'm not really sure how you plan to have 933 homes plus, again, a variety of ADUs be able to escape simply on the bike trail if a train were to derail. But additionally, we really do face a significant opportunity for flooding, given the fact that we are on a convergence of two rivers and we're landlocked by the freeway. It seems absolutely insane to me that we think that putting 933 lots on one main road ingress point is a good idea. Also, I have a concern about safety. We've had 2 drive-by shootings on one house. What happens if there's a mass shooter and we have one way in and one way out? There's no way that the police personnel is going to go and unlock those gates in the back while they're fighting a shooter. And that's a real problem, given that I know that there's been a drive-by shooting in here twice. I'm not, again, really sure how we reconcile this, given how fast fires have moved in Maui and how fast fires have moved in Sonoma County and Paradise. And I'd really like to know why it is that the interest of the builder and the safety of the residents are being ignored, but the interest of the builders being facilitated. I also am concerned that all this was done on consent previously, and we have a train station being built as well.
So you asked a lot of questions, Jennifer, a lot in a row. I'm not sure that all of those are going to be able to be answered simply because of the volume that was asked and no opportunity in between them to address them. So we'll certainly do our best, but I apologize in advance if we aren't able to deal with everything that was mentioned. So I guess I would just start off by asking maybe Kevin Perkins to talk about the relationship between any changes in law after or regulations after subdivisions are legally approved, and the effect on the existing rights of those approved subdivisions and what the developers had already submitted. So and in addition to if CAL FIRE regulations would apply to, and I'm unclear if CAL FIRE regulations would apply to a subdivision on the valley floor. So Kevin, is that something you can address?
Yeah, I can answer those 2 questions. I was gonna, good questions, and I appreciate the opportunity to respond. So I'll answer the vested right section or question first. And so when any project, land use project is approved, it's approved with a set of conditions of approval, which are rules that subdivision or project needs to meet in order for that project to be constructed or move forward. And also there's a number of environmental mitigation measures that are similar to conditions of approval that a project needs to have in order to move forward. So when a developer receives that approval, they have a vested right. And what that means is they have the right to move forward with their project as long as that project is still within its expiration period. So each project, again, gets a certain amount of time to be able to be developed before it expires, and then the applicant would have to, or developer would have to redo the project. But when that project is approved, it has a vested approval, which means it's allowed to be built at the rules and the conditions that were in place at the time of its approval. And so that's why some of these projects, when you're talking about changes that, when they're approved, they were approved at the current state laws or current requirements. That's one. And two, in terms of CAL FIRE regulations, CAL FIRE's has land use authority over all areas in the state and the county that are in a state responsibility area. Chief Heggstrom can correct me if I'm incorrect on this, but an SRA is basically a high fire severity area in the county. So our foothill areas, our Camp Far West areas in the county all fall under the SRA. And so CAL FIRE again has jurisdiction over all SRAs, and the rules you cited are correct in an SRA. However, Plumas Lake is not located in a high fire severity zone, so they are not subject to those CAL FIRE requirements that you cited. That the fire requirements go through the local fire department, and on all these projects, we did make sure that the fire requirements from the local fire district were met. So that is my answer on those first two questions.
Great, thank you, Kevin. I know there was a question also about the flood risk, and so I'm not sure who would like to address it, but I do know that typical slow rise flood event in Yuba County, I know Oscar touched on this briefly, but would someone like to talk about how that works now after what we learned from 86 and 97, and kind of the scenario, how it would play out if we had a high water event, and talk about how there's triggers and evacuation points and all those, and the timing with respect to those and a potential levee failure.
Gary, Supervisor Bradford, I'll start. Everybody, I'm Patrick Marr, I'm the general manager for RD 784. From the levee patrol standpoint, our protocol is we watch the water forecasts on CDEC, on Department of Water Resources website, and when the water is forecasted to go into monitor stage, that triggers 12-hour shift levee patrols 24 hours a day until the water recedes below that monitor stage. And so our first protocol is to notify Yuba County OES that we intend to do those patrols, and then in turn they will communicate that to the public. So that's where RD 74 steps in once the water is forecasted to rise, and depending on how long it stays up on the levee, will determine how long we continue those patrols.
Okay, thank you. And either Oscar or maybe Kevin Mallon, I know that we have specific trigger points that when the water is even forecast to reach a certain phase or a certain level on the levees, that we do evacuations in certain areas. Can one of you speak to that process and the anticipated timing between when that would happen and when a potential or more likely levee failure would happen? I mean, my understanding is we're not talking anything immediate. We're talking a significant amount of time between when the county would call for an evacuation based on those thresholds and when potential safety issues would actually occur.
Yes, and actually Sheriff Anderson may be the best to kind of walk folks through those trigger points as the water rises on a levee, for example, when warnings are issued versus evacuation orders. But there's definitely a very methodical process in place.
Okay, Sheriff, is that something you can talk to?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. Yeah, so we have trigger points at various locations throughout the county for the slow rise flood events, and short of a failure of one of our levees, we historically see certain numbers in certain locations. The Bear River, I think the 21 feet is the warning stage, 24 is actually flood stage, and then 25 would be obviously flooding. So we watch those very closely. We had meetings this year about the various stages, and we never reached the point, where we had an evacuation warning. We did, we were obviously in monitoring stage. And Oscar, you can correct me, I think we did reach warning stage at one point. But yeah, when we get to those trigger points, we would have a process in place, and it would be, starting out with an evacuation warning. which we would encourage anybody who's ambulatory, having problems, that maybe doesn't get around well, to leave the area. And then the follow up from that would be an evacuation or a mandatory evacuation. I don't think we can use mandatory anymore, though. Oscar, you can correct me on that. But those trigger points set off events, for evacuation warnings and then mandatory evacuations. I've been through 2 floods here in Yuba County, and I know maybe you don't care. In '86, I was flooded as a resident. I lived in Linda, and in '97, I was working at the sheriff's department the night the levee broke, when the levee broke, and it is hectic. It is. It was pretty daunting. It was scary, but we got through it. We didn't. We were able to get everybody safely evacuated. I think we had a few people that refused to evacuate that we had to rescue later. But I mean, I guess what I'm getting to is I take this seriously. The sheriff's department takes this seriously. And we constantly monitor those stages. Now, a fire, a train derailment, those are things that happen without warning. And, we have a playbook for those as well. And, the zone haven, the door-to-door notifications, I understand that you guys have a unique problem, and it's not lost on me. And, but I think, doing what we can in advance, sign up for Zone Haven, have a plan, have a personal plan to get out. If you do have difficulty, if you're, disabled, get out earlier. Then, it's better to be safe than sorry. And I would never want to see, I've sifted through ashes, and I don't ever want to do that again. Losing somebody in an emergency or in a situation like that is just so traumatic for the entire community. So we do take that seriously. We have regular meetings regarding it. We have roundtable meetings regarding different scenarios. We can't come up with all the different scenarios that could happen. There could be an active shooter, there could be a train derailment, but we use the playbook that we have and try to adapt to the situation. And the staff that we have at the sheriff's department is up to any task, in my opinion. And I know I'm kind of getting on my soapbox a little bit, but we truly care. And your questions are questions that I've asked myself several times. But the bottom line is that the sheriff's department is dealing with what we have in place. I live in a community that has one ingress point, one egress point. I live in the hills, and it always crosses my mind about what we would do when 2017 was when the Orville Dam incident. That was horrific, and I know that the highways were jam packed, and but we do what we can with what we can. We learn from those mistakes that were made and the things that were good. And I'll quit talking now because I know I'm just rambling. But I mean, we truly do care, and I know that everybody on this call cares, and I know behind the scenes that they've been trying to get some alternative routes in place, and they're hitting some stone walls. So that's all I have. I'll be happy to answer any other questions, but we do have protocols in place. We adhere to them, and we take your safety and the safety of the communities very seriously.
Thank you, Sheriff. I know we've got someone else has their hand raised, and I'll get to you in just a moment. There's just a couple more items from Jennifer that I wanted to have addressed. So first of all, and Chief Heggstrom, maybe you can talk about this. I know you and I had a conversation about it the other day. From a fire standpoint, I think the most frequent concern I hear from residents is fire starts in the Bear River and the river bottoms. There's a strong wind, and it blows into the neighborhood. And we wind up with a Maui or a Paradise kind of situation. I know that that's certainly not impossible, but when you and I talked, you kind of said, you shared that based on typical wind patterns and fire behavior, there's actually a more likely path that a fire would, the risk is higher from a different direction. And so maybe could you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's an important thing to understand.
Yeah, of course, of course. As we discussed, the typically in the valley and specifically for that community, the winds of concern for us are the north winds that come out of the north and push south and would give us an opposite wind effect than what we'd have in that Bear River corridor or up against the levee in that area. I can tell you that the London Fire Protection District has an extensive weed abatement program. We work very closely with 784 to make sure we're managing the vegetation and managing the grasses as best we can. And I personally, we survey every single parcel in the community to make sure that they're doing their best to try to maintain fire safety and take care of the weeds that they have on their properties. But to answer the question, as you brought up, yeah, the north wind is more of a concern and becomes more of that fire danger and that red flag warning that we have here in the valley. South winds typically come a little bit more moisture. They are a little more humid. And not to say it can't happen. We have south winds, and then they do cause some issues, but again, not as big of a concern. I know that 784 does a good job on that levee and keeps that mowed and keeps that little flat area behind those homes mowed and keeps that vegetation down. I think with the newer community, the fire resistant materials is extremely helpful, being stucco and having things like that. So it's definitely possible, but I'd like to believe that not as possible.
Great. Thank you, Chief. So just the only other thing I remember from the list of questions was just a mention of the train station and some additional concerns for that. So just wanted to let the community know. I know there's been a little bit of confusion. The planned train station is actually for north of Feather River Boulevard, even though it is still on the east side of Highway 70. So that station is not anywhere near the neighborhood as far as relative to that station itself causing issues for the neighborhood. So with that, I'm gonna. Oh, go ahead.
Gary, just real quick. So Jennifer mentioned the access and the keys. My staff has keys to those bollards and are, during briefing, obviously we talk about that, but all of our supervisors have them and all of our patrol cars have them.
Great, thank you, Sheriff. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute Jess so that they can speak. Or Jairus, sorry. Go ahead.
Were you talking to JP?
Whoops, no, it went away. It said on here, I think it said Jairus.
J. Eris, I'm sorry, that's me. That's
sorry.
JP.
Okay,
Yeah.
Sorry.
So talking about the keys, and a number of individuals had said there's a plan. Unfortunately, we as residents don't know what your plans are. And so when you say we can plan appropriately to get out, we don't know what that means for you. So my concern is your staff have keys. How do we know when those bollards will be unlocked and open? And how will we know that that's the appropriate route to take? There's no emergency evacuation signs. There's nothing up right now. So if we are all heading north, but there are people who can't evacuate themselves and emergency personnel need to get in, they need to come south. How is that going to work on the bike trail? Because that bike trail couldn't handle the PG&E trucks without deteriorating. I'm not quite sure how it's going to handle even 1,000 cars that are on and off the trail without deteriorating it to the point where you're going to be four-wheeling to get out. That's one question is, right, how can we do emergency preparedness as a community so we all know everybody's plans? That's my main concern.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. Would you like to talk again about Zone Haven and how that would factor into any kind of evacuation notices from the Sheriff's Department and your ability to direct people which way to go and to make sure they could go that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Gary. And those are great points that you brought up. And so one of the features in Zone Haven is that we can also, when we send those notifications, it sends you a link and it will actually give you the evacuation route, the chosen evacuation route. Now, not knowing what the emergency would be or where it would come from, it's hard to, to sit here and answer that question for you. But the Zone Haven response will give you that information when it comes. And, depending on the location of the emergency, and it will tell you whether to go north or south. And I don't know if I answered it adequately, but that is the answer that we have. Zone Haven has not canned responses, but we can tune responses or information to give you those.
Okay, and whoops, do we lose
So
you? Oh, go ahead.
So it sounds like the Zone Haven is for maybe a planned evacuation. I'm talking about a train derailment. People are trying to get out. They're panicked. There's more than 1,000 cars, and people are trying to get in. And when we're being told to use the bike path as an evacuation route, and something happens, and we're on that bike path within minutes because we have, as a family, put together an appropriate plan, and we come up against a locked bollard because someone has to drive in from Yuba City, someone has to stop an emergency response on something because they have a key in their car. That's what I'm talking about. There seems to be an awful lot of opposition to having another road right off the bat with this conversation. Everybody had an excuse and a reason why, but we're not thinking about emergency preparedness in its true sense. I'm not talking about having 6 hours notice. I'm in Charleston right now. We're in the middle of a hurricane, right? So that's what I'm talking about. We can have some forewarning. However, a tornado just touched down within 5 minutes of the home I'm in. That's the evacuation I think we are all concerned about. Something that isn't pre-planned. And I just don't know why the lives of 9,000 individuals on the east side are not being looked at. If we can build a train station next to an off-ramp, why can we not work in why the county can't work in some emergency plan to make that happen is really beyond me. I mean, Kevin, you said that this was approved when you were in high school. Do you really know how ridiculous that sounds? There was a plan for a development when you were in high school, and nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. That is unheard of in this day and age. Unheard of. And if that's the county's response, then the county really needs to get educated and get educated quick. We have a sheriff who is saying exactly what we are, but trying to be really nice about it. Read the room. Please speak to us. Please speak to us about an evacuation plan that happens within minutes. Who unlocks that door? Where do we get the emergency preparedness plan that's put forth? 3 of you have mentioned plans. That's what I want. I want something that I can get a hold of and read. I want a response that talks about what can be done and not reasons why it can't be.
So
I'm trying to be very respectful.
There's a couple questions there, and one of them comes up often, which is, tell me right now how I should evacuate in an emergency so that me and my family can have a plan of what exactly we're going to do and where we're going to go. And I'll tell you the answer that I get every time from OES and the sheriff related to that. And I personally believe it makes a lot of sense. And that is, they cannot tell you ahead of time a specific evacuation route to take and a specific direction to go, because it's very dependent on the specific emergency. For example, let's just talk about two of the things that have been mentioned here, flood and fire, right? If there is a fire at the north end of the subdivision and people think that they should use the bike path to evacuate, they would be driving directly into the fire. Similarly, if there is a fire or maybe a levee issue at the south end of the community and people are they try to have a plan ahead of time and they go that direction, they could drive right into danger. And so what the sheriff does, they tell you specifically based on the specific disaster through the tools that the county has deployed, how you should be evacuating and where you should be evacuating. And the fact that the sheriff calls that evacuation, they use their deputies that are in the area helping with that evacuation to do things like unlock the gate. And so they would be here really almost immediately, deputies that are in the area to take care of those things. And so I understand the desire to have a written, here's where you go during a flood, here's where you go during a fire. But unfortunately, because there's no way to predict where those incidents will be occurring, you can't be directed on exactly where to go and how to go during an evacuation until that specific emergency comes up. So Sheriff, I don't know, or OES, if you have anything to add to that, but that's my understanding. And it's a question that comes up all the time, all across the county. You know, tell me where to go in a flood. Tell me what direction to go. Tell me which road to use. If there's a fire, which way should I go? And it just depends on where those things happen. And so, Sheriff, anything to add to that? Oops, maybe we lost the sheriff. Okay. Oh, there he is. Oh, let me, looks like let me. Here you go, Sheriff. Sorry. You're a co-host again. You can unmute.
No, sorry about that. I actually got disconnected there. I apologize for that. So
did you hear the question and kind of what I was saying?
No, I did. And I think, you know, you answered it the best you could, Gary. And, you know, you're right. So what do we do in this, in an emergency? Well, it depends. It depends on what the emergency is, where the threat is coming from. And in terms of the response to that gate, to unlock those gates, Patrick mentioned it earlier, you know, when we hit certain thresholds, specifically with slow rise flood, and that's just one example, but, you know, we have people in certain locations and sometimes assisting with levee patrols as well. So when we get to a certain river level, you know, we automatically go to 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week. You know, that's just when we hit certain levels in the river, that's what we do. So yeah, the answer to that is, yeah, it depends on where the threat is and what it is.
So Megan, I know you have a question as well, but before we get to that, we're going to address the question. I've seen it from multiple people in the chat, as well as just mentioned about, you know, what's the hesitancy or the resistance to building an alternative route for the neighbors to get out. Maybe not even an actual, just for emergency only, but even another road, or, you know, I know things have come up multiple times, a connection to Algodon, a northbound freeway on-ramp, and things like that. So Sam Button from Public Works, is this a question that would be appropriate to have you answer?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to speak on that. Hi, everybody. I'm Sam Button. I'm the Public Works Director for Yuba County. I guess first off, thanks, Gary, for putting this on, and everybody else for joining. I know you're all taking time away from your family and friends and dinner as well. So thanks for letting us participate in that. But so I guess a couple of comments, and one of the ones I heard as well is like the adequacy of the road. So there was an issue with PG&E blowing up the road during one of the storms. We did rehab the road to be able to, and we're 100% sure that it can handle the weight of any of the emergency services. So we are very confident in the adequacy of the road. So unfortunate event, but we did handle that very quickly. So happy to move on from that. For the access to the road or to State Route 70, I would say, with Caltrans. Caltrans is very particular about their access control, their policy, and from a district or a headquarters level throughout the state. They would not approve even an emergency access on the State Route 70, like at what we would call at grade. So like a gate where you just drive out on the State Route 70. Caltrans will not allow that. If there was like, say, $40 million to construct an interchange, that would still be extremely unlikely that they approve that. The interchanges are too close to each other. So there's Plumas Lake Boulevard and Feather River Boulevard. Those interchanges, I think, are around 3.5 miles apart from each other. The interchanges are too close, and it's very unlikely that Caltrans would not approve that. The roads like Shallows Creek, and I think Dusty Maiden as well, they were designed for the amount of homes and those to get people out of there. And in general, a one-lane road can handle 10 to 20,000 cars a day. I do know in an emergency event, people are driving out sometimes many times at once, like in a fire situation. I know in a flooding event or like a low-rise situation, obviously that traffic is a little bit slower, and people are moving out over time. But the interchange with Feather River Boulevard, it is there to accommodate all the traffic of the development. But if you were to go north on the bike path was designed to allow people to get out to Algodon Road. For the comment of making the road or making it like an actual a road to get out to Algodon Road, there's constraints like right-of-way widths. There's where Caltrans property and the railroad property, they neck down and you wouldn't really be able to get the widths in there. And there's some utilities as well as along with the Plumas Lake Boulevard interchange that get in the way. So a bike path, one-lane direction for the emergency route is the way it's been designed to work. And we do believe that in an emergency situation it'll work. So hopefully that answers everybody's questions. Gary, was there anything I was missing in there?
No, I think that was predominantly what was asked about, why we're not just building an interchange or a northbound on-ramp to 70 or even an emergency on-ramp to 70. I know that's something we specifically checked on this exact week with Caltrans to see if even a gated emergency access to Highway 70 would be possible, and we were told it would not be. So I think that was it for now. I'm going to go ahead and go to Megan's question.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. My first question is related to what you were just talking about. Since you did speak with Caltrans this week, would it be possible to get the contact information of somebody at Caltrans who could provide me with whatever ordinance or code that they have that would not allow an emergency egress directly onto the freeway in the event of a catastrophic emergency where people need to get out? And then my other question is, so there's two. So one, contact info for Caltrans, because apparently that's who we need to convince to allow us to have a second egress out of this neighborhood. My second question is, and this is not about a low rising flood or any of these pre-planned where we've got evacuation plans. And again, I'm not asking for you to tell me which way to get out of my neighborhood, because that's already been planned out for us to use the bike path. That's our second way out. If we can't go out by the river, you've already planned it out for us. Our other route is out the bike path. My question is, and this might be for the sheriff, unfortunately, I hate to put you on the spot, but I need to know, one, how many keys are there? And who is holding those keys? And I need an exact amount of time that it's going to take for somebody to unlock that lock. Or so help me, I will take my husband's plasma cutter and I will cut that gate down myself. Sorry, but that's my question.
That's okay. And I don't know that you're going to like my answer, Megan. I mean, as far as how long it's going to take, I can't answer that. Like we said earlier, it depends on the emergency. I can tell you that all of our vehicles have those keys in them, and it depends on where my deputies are, what the situation is, and I wouldn't hold it against you if you cut that lock if you needed to in an emergency. But So, again, it just depends. And I know that, that you hear that a lot, but it depends on where the deputies are, what the situation is, as to how long it takes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Okay, we have a question from Christopher. Go ahead, Christopher.
Yeah, this isn't Christopher. This is his father-in-law, Mark. The question I have is not so much about putting in an overpass, but like they have that exit off of 70 to 99, where it's just a exit off, where you don't have to do all that big infrastructure. There is room that is by that pre-planned park on the north end where you could, and I don't know how much space you need to come in and just go to that stop sign or the road that's right there, and also have an exit. So you could go exit northbound into here and then leave northbound, but not have a southbound exit. Would that be something that is feasible and not as expensive as putting in an overpass? And I know that it's too close.
Yeah, I can speak.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely a great question. And yeah, amazing questions from everybody. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. So Caltrans, from about the Bear River all the way to Marysville, it is determined to be a freeway. So anything that they would entertain would have to be something like an interchange. They wouldn't allow any type of just kind of free connections like that. I totally understand where you're coming from on that one, and definitely familiar with the area that you're speaking of. But I find it very, very unlikely that Caltrans would approve that. In their policies, they wouldn't. And we can also, I think one of the comments was about the contact to Caltrans as well. More than happy to pass those along. And we also have the information of where it's at in their policy. And there's actually other situations in other jurisdictions where Caltrans, like in Nevada County, if an agency had requested that, Caltrans, like putting up like rocks and those types of things to make sure that people don't take advantage of gates and things that are installed right outside of the right of way as well. But so in this instance, I guess to specifically answer your question, no, I do Caltrans, unless it's an interchange, kind of like Plumas Lake Boulevard or Feather River Boulevard, they wouldn't allow any additional connections to State Route 70.
Thank you, Sam. I think we answered it, but it's come up again. So someone's asking about a 2-lane road to Arboga. So if you want to kind of readdress the challenges with extending a road north from the neighborhood and connecting it to Arboga, really essentially where the bike path is.
Yeah, and so I think it was Mark that was asking about this, but so kind of where that open space is just north of North Point, the property lines, they kind of neck down like this and don't allow the width as well as some of the utilities. So trying to sneak in between the Caltrans and the railroad, what we call right of way, or like the property lines, don't allow the full width of a road to go through there.
Okay, I know there's a question in the chat that I just saw related to some places in Sacramento that maybe have connections that are, closer together, so less than 2 miles. I know I Googled a couple weeks ago, I Googled the Caltrans regulations, and that's where I saw that it's 1 mile in an urban area and 2 miles in a rural area, and that we're considered a rural area. So that's why there would be a difference between maybe here and some of the places in Sacramento. I'm not positive about this. Sam could probably give more specifics, but I also assume that a lot of the interchanges and things that are closer than that in urban areas or in rural areas were interchanges that were built prior to those current regulations being in place. I have to imagine there's a lot of things built in the Caltrans network that don't align with current requirements. And so often we might see those and kind of go, hey, well, it's over here, how come we can't do it? And it's really because something changed in the meantime.
Yep. Yeah, you're totally right, Gary. And so just like the fire requirements and any of the other laws, things are constantly changing. Caltrans back in the 50s to the 70s, and they were building a lot of infrastructure as well. Cars are going a little bit slower and those types of things, right? And the policies have changed drastically over time. So some of those things are grandfathered in, but with their current requirements, they really like at an absolute minimum to see things 2 miles away. And that's an absolute minimum. So they do prefer that things are even further than that. But yeah, to the point in Sacramento and a lot of the busier, like LA, you'll see lanes and those types of, or interchanges much closer. And even to make a lot of those things work, they have very expensive flyovers, and the on and off ramps get very complicated. They do additional lanes and things like that on the freeway as well to get them to work. But from a Caltrans perspective, they're very picky about what we do in their space. And unfortunately, in this situation, we don't believe them to allow anything else. So.
Okay. Thank you. One thing I think I'm definitely willing to do, and Sam, I know I'm sure you'd be willing to join me and anyone else from the panel if we tried to set up a meeting with Caltrans to, have these conversations with them. I don't know what the result of that will be, but it's certainly, worth a try. I mean, I think the county wants to, try to find ways to create additional access for the residents, since it's such a big concern.
Yep, we're more than happy to support it.
Okay, are there any additional questions? If you have a question, you can go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, there is a question in the chat about essentially creating, I assume it says creating a pathway to Hoffman Road, a small underpass. So I assume the question is build something up and over the train tracks and the levee and across the WPIC and over to the other side. I know there'd be a lot of challenges with that, but I don't know if anyone wants to address the feasibility of something like that.
I think I can speak to it real quick, Gary. Just kind of shooting from the hip on numbers. And by no means am I advocating that dollars should go in front of money. I think just dollar wise, $20 to $30 million to get kind of over all that stuff. You hit the nail on the head. There is the WPIC, or the Western Pacific Interceptor Canal right there. And I do think that section of Hoffman Road is no longer I think Mike Lee may be able to speak to if that's the section that we abandoned or not. It might not be a county road right there anyways. So
I think
it might be private property.
I think you're correct. I remember being involved in that. So, yeah. Okay, any additional questions at this time? Okay, we do have one from Carla. I'll go ahead and get you unmuted. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to get us off so you can see us.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for giving us this opportunity to meet with you all. I'm sorry, but I'm not really hearing answers to a lot of the questions that the residents are asking. And so my concern is, and I also put it in the chat, is will we have an actual maybe live training to actually see how it would happen if something was to, an emergency was to happen? Is CAL FIRE or the fire department or the sheriff's department going to put in some type of actual training for us to simulate, an emergency? I think there needs to be some type of training, not just to send us to a link and tell us to, look up which way to go. In an emergency, we're going to be, all packing up, hurried in a rush and trying to get out of here all at probably once. We're not going to be looking for a link to tell us which way to go.
Sure.
So that's my question.
Is that something you can talk about? I don't know if it's possible for the sheriff to do some kind of test for residents who wanted to participate in that.
We could certainly do a test. A large scale training would be a heavy lift, but I mean, we would be willing to participate in that. It would take a lot of other entities, but we could do some simulations via code red, or the door-to-door notifications, high-low, whatever it may be. We would certainly be willing to participate in that to prepare people.
Okay, that's something I think we can talk about more and see what the potential opportunities are there. Okay. Oh.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you guys have
Okay,
a follow-up question?
Yeah, my concern, like some of the other people were stating also, was even with the trail, in an emergency, being such a narrow path getting out, someone's car stalling, a fire possibly happening going that way as well from a car, because there is a lot of vegetation out there that dries up. That would be a concern too. Someone getting trapped and we can't get out because of a vehicle. That is a very narrow spot for an evacuation, for cars. And you got to take into consideration those who are disabled, trying to get out. That would probably be really, really sad to see everybody get stuck there. Something's tragically happened in that area as everybody's trying to get out. So that's a big concern as well. I'm listening to a lot. I work for Caltrans, and I have done road maintenance up in the city, and it could be pretty hectic, trying to flag traffic in and out, or trying to get people to understand which way to go in the case of emergency. So, as far as having a exit on the other end or northern side, would really be vital. And, for us to put in place pressure that to come into play. I don't know how we're going to do that if we can get more people involved, but I don't see an emergency evacuation happening, where everybody would be safely in and out, getting out, or just trying to get some traffic in here to get some help. So, that it's kind of scary, sitting here complaining, thinking about that with all the tragedy that's been happening with a lot of the fires already, with so many residents here. And, it's a concern of mine. Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't know if there's, Sheriff, I don't know if you're able to respond to that. And also, I know there's an assumption, I think, that any evacuation would utilize the bike path. And I think that's where a lot of the concerns are coming from. I know that, as we mentioned, what way people evacuate is very dependent on the situation and where the emergency is occurring at, and what, how quickly people have to evacuate, what evacuation options are available for that emergency. But and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but the bike path is not the primary emergency evacuation route for the neighborhood. Feather River Boulevard is the primary emergency evacuation route for the neighborhood, and the bike path is an alternate and backup emergency evacuation route should that not be accessible for some reason. So, Sheriff, I don't know if you can correct me if I'm wrong or make additional comments about that.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the worst case scenario is that we have to use the bike trail, obviously. I understand the concerns. I didn't really, there wasn't really a question that I could answer, to be honest with you. I appreciate your concern, and God forbid we have to do it. We may never have to do it, but we want to be prepared to do it.
Right.
So I understand your concern, sir, and those types of things keep me up at night, quite frankly. But as it stands right now, that bike trail, hopefully we never have to use it. But should we need to use it, I have the same concerns. A fire, somebody getting stuck, somebody breaking down. Depending on the conditions that we're presented with, all these different scenarios could come into play, or circumstances. So all I can tell you is we're going to be as prepared as we can. you know, for any emergency that happens. And, you know, I can only promise you we'll do our best. And I know that's not, you know, not an answer to a lot of your questions, but there are so many different things that can happen, as we've seen, you know, in this world we live in today, from, you know, active shooters, violence, floods, fires, earthquakes. There's no way to, you know, many of those, they could happen at a moment's notice, and we don't know. We just have to be ready to act. So I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for you. Nothing that's going to put you at ease. You have concerns, I understand. I do know that these gentlemen on here are trying to find an alternative route, and I've been in some discussions with them, and we won't stop trying. And we'll do the best we can with what we have.
Thank you.
Can we get the next meeting dates on this subject, either posted after the meeting here on Zoom chat or on the east side of Plumas Lake chat? And maybe an address where we can all kind of just follow up and show up.
So I guess I would follow that up with a question of I have no problem scheduling a second meeting, but my question would be, are there additional things that you want to discuss at the meeting, or would you like me to report back on like what we found from our meeting with Caltrans? I just want to understand specifically what would be the purpose and goal and content of this follow-up meeting at this point.
Pretty much what you said about us, any contact that, any information coming back from Caltrans or the county, or what may be looking to be in place, or where we at as far as giving us some information, as opposed to just like, this is what it is. We only have one exit, and that's coming in on Plumas Lake, on Feather River Road, you know. So yeah, that would probably be really something that would be vital, you know, to kind of at least keep us in the air of what's going on.
Yeah, and if we have new information, I'd be happy to, number one, post it, and number two, if interested, schedule a meeting for sure.
Okay, thank you.
So Oscar, I think you should be able to, looks like you're.
How's it? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Supervisor Bradford, for this. Again, everybody, sorry. I've been having some technical difficulties trying to get the meeting. I am the Yuba County OES, or Emergency Operations Manager here for Yuba County. I was born here. I was raised here. I've been through the 86 flood. I've been through the 97 floods. And I've worked through fires in our county as well. I worked at the city of Marysville for the fire department. I can assure you that we do everything possible to make sure that our county residents are safe. This is my hometown, my home county. Family lives here. Family lives out in Plumas Lake. I can assure you that we do everything we possibly can to make sure that you are all safe at all times. I understand the situation that the East Plumas Lake area has. When I first came into this position, I know that you guys have been trying to get another exit. I can't speak on behalf of why Caltrans decided not to. It's not in my jurisdiction to do, but knowing that I can't have a second access route as of right now for you guys, I plan accordingly for this. There's plenty of plans and trigger points and stuff that we do to notify residents of this. I will notify you way well in advance before anyone's in real danger in this county. And working alongside with the sheriff department, our HSS department, our state officials, we are constantly in communication and always looking further 3 to 4 days in advance and see what's coming up next in this area. I understand some incidents and some emergencies happen with no notice, but we planned accordingly for that. The fire department we have in Yuba County, they're excellent on what they do, and the sheriff department are excellent on what they do on evacuations. So I can rest assured to the community that we do everything that we possibly can to make sure you are safe. You are basically, Yuba County is my family home. It's my home. Like I can't stress that enough. Sheriff Anderson says it enough. We are all homegrown here, and we really want the best for the community, and the safety is our first concern.
Great, thank you, Oscar. So Kevin Perkins, I know it's been brought up several additional times in the chat. Maybe you could address one more time our ability to essentially say that this development that was approved can't happen, and that is not, the Board of Supervisors can't do that. County planning staff can't do that. The Planning Commission can't do that. Those subdivisions have a legal right to develop.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear everyone's frustration, but you're correct, Gary. As I mentioned earlier, these subdivisions, when they're approved, the developer gets a vested right. So they have the ability to develop these projects as they were approved until the map potentially expires at some point in the future. So they do have vested development rights.
Thank you. And I know we have a question from Timmy, so I'm going to go ahead and Timmy, you should be able to unmute and speak.
Hi there. Actually, this is Lisa.
Hi,
I just
Lisa.
wanted to comment. Hi. I just would like to make a comment. You all have said over and over again about how safe we are, but actually you really can't make these assurances. You can't make notices, as the person a few moments ago had said. He was saying that, we're going to be made aware, we're going to have notices, we're going to have, well in advance notice, when that's just not the case. You might be able to make notices for events that aren't unplanned, but for those unplanned emergencies, we'll have no notice. Fires, lightning strikes, earthquakes, train derailments, those sorts of things. You can't make notices for those. It makes absolutely, I've been sitting here listening to this, and it makes absolutely no sense how the county in general is trying to make sense of a planned project that was planned and approved over 30 years ago, knowing full well that there is major liability for the safety of the community now, and then falling back on grandfathered regulations, knowing that you could have a catastrophe and that even your top safety professionals are basically hoping for the best. And that's what some of the language and what the words they're using. The county as a whole really should be ashamed. I hope right now that county council, instead of, trying to look for the things that we need as a community on the east side, with all of us together in this together, because that's really what it's going to be. As our sheriff said, and I really do feel bad for the sheriff, because their resources are limited and they can only do what they can do by what they're given from the county. They said themselves, we don't know when those gates will be unlocked, because we don't know where they'll be. They might be somewhere else dealing with another emergency. But I really hope that county council is looking at where the money will come from the lawsuits that will come, is because now you all are on notice. And when that emergency happens, as we all know it will, that's what essentially is going to happen. And, I hear about, the 87 flood that people got out, but look how much Plumas Lake in general has grown and how much Yuba County has grown since 1987. That was a really long time ago. So I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, any additional questions? Okay. Seeing none, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I want to thank especially the folks from the county who joined to provide the best answers we could to the concerns that the community has. I certainly know that there's a belief by some that I don't take this seriously, and I really I do want to take this seriously. It's why I rounded up this group of people to speak to you tonight and to hear your concerns and to see what we can do to address them. And if I could wave a magic wand and build another interchange, or change the layout of the subdivisions, I would absolutely do that. So unfortunately, those are not options that I have available to me at this time. Like I said, I'm committed to meeting with Caltrans and seeing if there's anything that can be done. Hopefully that's something that we can do, and continuing to look for solutions if anything else presents itself. But aside from that, I think the important thing is to make sure that, as the sheriff mentioned, people are signed up for the emergency evacuation apps so they can receive instructions on how to evacuate should an emergency occur. And as has been mentioned, there are many emergencies, like Lisa said, that you don't have a warning, right? And so, and then there are some that you would. And so anyway, with that, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting, and thank you again, everyone, for participating, and have a great night.